So I'm delighted to welcome Chloe Smith, who's an MP for Norwich North, which covers the area to the north of the city and the north of the city centre. Chloe is the Minister of State. She's a Minister for Disabled People for Health and Work within the Department for Work and Pensions. Chloe and I first met about 5 or 6 years ago when she came along to the office to find out a little bit more about us. When I offered her a cup of coffee when she walked through the door, she handed me a packet of Lemsip and said, just put some water in that. So I always kind of remember that first meeting. But as a result of that meeting, Chloe very kindly helped us to unlock some money with the County Council and also to write a newspaper article for us, which helped explain some of the difficulties we were having. And following on from that, we obviously got ourselves straight. We celebrated our 50th anniversary in 2017 and are in a much better place to deal with the challenges that we have now. So thank you very much retrospectively for that, Chloe, to do. So a lot of people may not know that there was a Minister for Disabled People. So can you tell us a little bit about what that role is?
I certainly will, James. And first of all, a big thank you to you for everything you've done over the years. And, you know, I know on behalf of so many people that Build works with, you know, just how important your work really is. So it's been a real pleasure to try to work with you to support you in that over the years. And thank you very much also for inviting me to be with you today. It's absolutely great to celebrate a little bit of Christmas with you. So thank you very much for asking me. I think maybe the first thing to say about being a minister is actually how it connects up to being an MP, because this is I think a really good thing about the way we do it in Britain. We have all of our ministers in the government also being MPs, and that means that you really get to know the issues that much better because you're doing them with real people, real places. You know, your constituents are usually foremost in your mind, and that means you get this real understanding of what it is you then might try and add to doing it on the national stage, and I think that's really important. So I find it really valuable to do both roles and have always tried to make one learn from the other. As a minister, then, what I'm really focused on is is improving things for disabled people. So I've got kind of two halves to this role. The first half is in the Department for Work and Pensions, and many people who are watching this or listening to this will know that department. So, for example, I've got to look after the systems that run employment and support allowance or personal independence payment and a couple of the other slightly smaller benefits as well. And it's really important to me that that works well. I want to make sure that is serving disabled people well because it simply must. The second thing then is the chance to look at ways to do things differently, do things better, and I'm really doing that through the National Disability Strategy. And this is where I've got to work across government. So I'm the person responsible across government for knocking the heads together to implement the National Disability Strategy. We published it in July, and I'd really encourage anyone to have a look at it. I'll make sure the web link comes to you if you haven't already seen it. And it's a collection of actions across the entire breadth of public services and beyond, actually, from, you know, for example, education, jobs and housing, all the way through to shopping and leisure and playgrounds and the things that actually are there in people's everyday lives that do need to be made better and more inclusive and more accessible. So I'm incredibly passionate about all of that. And one other thing that I would just throw in that I'm working on as the minister is how to help more disabled people be in work if they want to. And this is incredibly important, and I've seen it locally. Actually, I founded and have run the Norwich for Jobs project, which has been all about getting young people into work, and in particular we focused on young people with a disability or with a health condition. So it was fabulous then to be able to apply that experience nationally, and it's something I really want to make a big difference in, help more people be in work if they wish to be, and close the gap in employment between disabled and non-disabled people.
And I think that's really important because it kind of leads on to my next question, which is about, you know, the voice of people with disabilities. Obviously, we're about providing social, leisure and learning opportunities. And I know a number of my colleagues across Norfolk are involved in advocacy. But one of the things we have always tried to encourage people is to use their vote, you know, when it comes to general elections or local elections. But other than the strategy, how would you encourage people with disabilities to get involved in shaping government and influencing government decisions? Because I guess now, you know, we're talking today, anticipating some more announcements from government about possible restrictions that they're going to affect us through COVID. How can people with disabilities express their opinion in any way different to anybody else?
Well, I think you're absolutely right to ask this question, James, and it's an incredibly important one. I couldn't achieve any of those things I've just spoken about without listening properly to disabled people, because I'm not doing it for anybody other than disabled people themselves. So the old adage is absolutely true. It shouldn't be anything about you without you, and we have to make it so in politics. So how can we do that? I mean, I think first of all, charities like yourselves are incredibly important, because it's a way to hear people's voices coming together and understand the issues in through the lens of what you do and what you're trying to make better. And any member of parliament should be listening to groups like yourselves in their constituencies and the expertise that you carry. And then taking it a little bit wider than that, there's some really valuable things that we can do through disabled people's organisations a bit more broadly, and then networks or forums of disabled people's organisations. And as a minister, I work with several groupings like that. So, for example, I've got a regional one which is looking across the whole of England as to listening to all of the disabled people's organisations in region by region, and many more networks besides. So I'm really looking for ways and opportunities to listen to disabled people, because that's absolutely critical. I'll throw in just a little light-hearted one as well, actually, which I'm sure a few people might have seen last weekend, which is Rose Ayling-Ellis on Strictly Come Dancing. Now, this is really a light-hearted one. Obviously, it was a great series, and it was just fabulous seeing her really come through as the first ever deaf contestant. And I think there'll be a lot of disabled people who might be quite inspired by that, and I hope also a lot of non-disabled people who've gained a bit more insight into what Rose's life has been like and what it means to be deaf, and also what it doesn't stop you doing being deaf. That's the critical point, isn't it? But the reason I mention this is to really underline that actually that's also a way of making a point, of campaigning, of getting a message across really loud and clear about what disabled people can do and the kind of inclusion that we should all be striving for.
And I think that's a really important point, because I think there is a lot there to be said about role models. And I think when people, look at politicians, look at governments, whether they are local or national governments, people are often looking to say, well, does that represent me? Does that person understand me? And I guess, a lot of people would be looking at it and saying, do we have role models within politics that we can relate to as people with disabilities? And I guess, yes, when we kind of look across politics, they aren't always visible, and that's quite good, because we know that a lot of disabilities are invisible. And I'm a great believer that we shouldn't be saying, well, that person is there because they have a disability. They should be there on merit. But do you think that either through politics or even through the media, we are presenting enough positive role models so that people with disabilities can go, actually, they do understand because they're like me?
I certainly hope so. I would really share your ambition on that. And the example of Rose actually is a very inspiring one. Even in a small way for me, she inspired me to start learning a little bit of British Sign Language. And actually, if viewers want to have a look at it, I recorded a congratulations message to her in BSL, which was me taking a tiny little step, but inspired by the massive strides that she's taken. Perhaps another example I could give is I look a little bit more broadly than, if you like, just disability on its own. I look at disability and ill health, because actually, of course, the two are quite closely linked, and many people might describe themselves using perhaps either or both words. And what I'm also conscious of is that you can have a lot of life experience in terms of not always having had perfect health, and that can be valuable in politics as well. I can draw on a small example of my own, having had breast cancer in the last year and worked through that, and made a recovery and being back in full health, which I'm very, very grateful for. But that does give you a little bit of insight into some of the issues and into how to support other people who are going through similar things. And if you take a step back and look at the statistics, You know, 1 in 5 people in this country would describe themselves as disabled, and 1 in 3 as having a long-term health condition. Now, that really does mean that actually all of us, one way or another, whether it's ourselves or whether it's a family member or a friend, are going to know what we're talking about. And that is all to your point about needing to have that reflected then in public life. Can I also just finally issue a plea, which is, if there's a person listening to this or watching this who would like to do public service themselves and might have a disability, don't let that stop you. Please step forward. We need you in public life too.
That's great. And I hope viewers will realise that just because you've taken up sign language, they're not expecting me to take up dancing, because that's just never going to happen. I think sign language might be easier for me to do. Finally, Chloe, the question we often ask our guests on occasions like this is about Christmas, and it's about, what's your favourite thing about Christmas? I know you've got 2 young children now. You've mentioned there you've had some battles with your own health, and we're delighted that there's good news on that front. So what are some of those favourite things about Christmas for you now?
Well, I think probably like everybody this year, I'm just actually so looking forward to having my family around, and I really want to just have the the Christmas that we missed out on last year. So I know that's in a lot of people's minds right now. I think I find myself at a bit of a transition point actually in terms of Christmas traditions. I've got the old ones I could call on from my own childhood, silly little ones like going out for a bike ride on Christmas Day with my dad, things like that. But now as a new parent, you're forging your own traditions. So I'm actually at that kind of crossroads right now. I've got a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. I doubt we will get much sleep on Christmas morning. I'm looking forward to wrapping the stockings up though, and just making it lovely for them. That's what I'm really looking forward to.
And I think that's it, isn't it? It's about people being able to be with the people that they want to. And I think even if we look at last Christmas and whatever we may be able to do, this Christmas, those are the things that we can't always take away, and we have to cherish those as we do. So I think some of the things we've learned today is we've learned a lot more about your role in government, and that's really encouraging about the fact that it's across departments liaising. We've also learned there that there are opportunities for people to contribute to the disability strategy, to be able to play that influence. And we've also talked a lot about role models and actually not limiting yourself as to the things that you can do. And I think those are really strong messages that people can take forward. And I think everybody will have enjoyed going for a bike ride with their dad. I certainly did, especially if I got a new bike. If I was still on the old bike and I'd wanted a new one and hadn't got one, it was a bit of a disappointment. But I think those things about family are great. So from all of us at Build, we'd like to wish you and your family a very happy Christmas, and stay safe like the rest of us. And we'll try and stay in touch with you on the strategy and other things that help you to be able to do your job, which ultimately will improve the lives of people with disabilities across the country. So thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thank you, James. And again, thank you and your teams for all that you do. And a big Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to everybody who's watching and who's been connected to Build over the last year. I know things have been pretty tough, but let's hope for a better year next year, and let's hope for that good, precious time with our families at Christmas.
That's great. Thank you very much.